Hi guys, welcome to the first video in a series I've started around management topics. Now these aren't just for managers, they could be useful in whatever sort of roles you're doing, so please hold tight and we're going to start off with this first topic. So, first topic we're going to cover is quantitative and qualitative metrics. What they mean, some of the sort of grey areas, and then also some of the pitfalls to avoid with regards to metrics in general, but really against this sort of measure of qualitative versus quantitative. So what do we mean by quantitative and qualitative metrics? Quantitative metrics. What we mean with quantitative is usually it's sort of specific numbers, it's specific values that are quite clear to understand. So, for instance, number of cups of coffee I've drunk. Equals 2. Now, we know what a cup of coffee is, and we know what to drink a cup of coffee is, so I've drank 2 cups of coffee. So that's something that we understand. We understand the quantity. Number of lines of code. I've written today. Ten. I mean, to be fair, it's sort of the morning and I'm making a video instead of doing code. So 10 lines of code, but we know, at least we know what line of code is, and we know that I have written 10 lines of code. Slight pause there, but we'll sort of carry on with that later on. And maybe products sold. Products sold this week, 150. So they're all quantitative numbers. You've sort of got the units of measure, cups of coffee, lines of code, products, and you've got the values. So they're quantitative metrics. So that's what quantitative means. Qualitative are less tangible. They're sort of more abstract. And to be honest, they're sort of more rolled up, which makes them more abstract. So things like customer satisfaction, things like product reviews, and things like team member performance. Now, you can sort of see that these are qualitative from the sort of description. They're sort of aggregated to the point where it's difficult to really understand specifically what they mean. So customer satisfaction, let's say it's 75%. Now this is useful in terms of measuring maybe what customer satisfaction was last month. Maybe it was 80%. That means customer satisfaction is lower based on this qualitative measure. But one of the things with this measure is we don't really know what the satisfaction is based on. So if you think about customer satisfaction, it might be quality, it might be communication, it might be cost, perceived value, all those different things. And actually to sort of put that in as a 75%, 75%, it might be that the customer is really happy with the cost, it's reduced. However, they're not very happy with the communication, and therefore they've essentially given a customer satisfaction of 75%, whereas last month they weren't really very happy with the cost, but they were really happy with the communication, it was 80%. So that's a sort of qualitative metric where it's difficult to really understand specifically inside the metric what that means. And you can imagine the same with product reviews. It's exactly the same sort of concept where essentially it's more sort of quality based, but what we're really saying with that is that it's not specific quantitative metrics that we're using. We're probably using a combination of them. And the reason why I say that, sort of team member performances as well, is that depending on what sort of framework you use for team member performance, usually there are multiple aspects of team member performance which again sort of blur what the actual output of that value would be. So team member performance, let's say it's a 8 out of 10 or something. That could be a whole different variety of quality values that make that 8 out of 10. So maybe their lines of code are really high, but they haven't been doing their training, they haven't been mentoring other people, all that sort of thing. So that's really the difference between quantitative and qualitative metrics, with obviously examples that are a bit more sort of technology based, but expected. So they're the two sort of definitions of quantitative and qualitative metrics. So we've gone through quantitative metrics. So you're probably thinking at this point, well, quantitative metrics are best, aren't they? Qualitative, they're not really very, very useful. Now, one of the challenges with this is I tend to agree quantitative metrics are better with regards to reporting. They're sort of tangible and they should be accurate and clear. However, there are challenges with regards to quantitative metrics, and this is the sort of shade of grey type challenge. So if we look at these examples, number of cups of coffee drunk today, we can assume the cup's the same size, but maybe it isn't. Maybe one's an espresso, one's a grande latte type thing. Number of lines of code. Although you've got a number of lines of code, how many were comments? Can you really say a line of code is anything other than just someone pressing the enter key? So it's difficult with regards to even these sort of quantitative metrics. Products sold this week. Again, if imagine you're say a garage or something, and you've got car showroom, but you also sell parts and accessories. Number of products. If you've got your 150 products sold this week, it's very difficult to really understand what that means. Is that cars? Is that tires? Is it, I don't know, what, cup holders? That sort of thing. So essentially, even quantitative metrics can be sort of verging on the qualitative side, which is difficult, especially when people start using more of the qualitative type metrics in a way in which they're quantitative, because people will generally take quantitative metrics on face value. There's an assumed accuracy there, and that is where you can lead into problems with regards to quantitative metrics. Okay, so quantitative and qualitative sort of covered that it's not black and white with regards to these. So the way I sort of like to think about this is, if you think about sort of a graph, and you've got one axis which is sort of whether something's demonstrable or can be evidenced, and then you've got the other axis, which is accuracy. So we've got, and this is obviously in the context of metrics, we've got demonstrable, evidenced, and accuracy. So if we draw a line through the middle here, we'll say, okay, do a different colour. This point here is the most quantitative a metric can be. So it's demonstrable and evidenced, and is accurate. So once sort of demonstrable and evidenced, number of cups of coffee. This is a cup of coffee, exactly the same measure, exactly the same quantity, and we've counted it, and we are confident that only 2 have been drunk today. So that's sort of demonstrable and accurate. So quantity up there. Down the bottom, qualitative, and this is not implying that there's a problem with accuracy per se, but if you think back to sort of customer satisfaction, the accuracy level's not very good because you are taking a lot of metrics and you're combining them. So, the challenge with that is that when you're looking at a difference in the overall satisfaction dropping or increasing, you're not really sure what led to that, other than the sort of average or accumulative metrics coming out lower or higher. So that's the sort of accuracy and qualitative aspect. Along with, again, the sort of the evidenced or the demonstrable nature of it. Okay, customer satisfaction. Okay, prove to me that the customer is satisfied. So, well, I can't really. We've got lots of different factors, and we basically average them out. So, that's sort of the maximum qualitative, maximum quantitative. And this isn't a good or bad thing with regards to the qualitative side. It's useful to have qualitative data when you don't have quantitative data, but it just sort of shows you the attributes of, say, quantitative versus qualitative metrics. So on this, and with the previous examples, so just referring to my notes on this, so we've got number of cups of coffee, yeah, that's on this part of the line. Now, caveat with this is, obviously, if your accuracy is down, if your accuracy is not as good, then it will go further down this line. So number of cups of coffee, we have a number of lines of code. And let's put that sort of similar-ish, but maybe slightly down, because obviously the number of lines of code, you may not be talking about the same length of characters, etc. It's more difficult to really suggest that lines of code are going to always be the same length. Code doesn't work that way. So that's that one. And then number of products sold would be, say, here. So further along, and this is based on not all products being equal. Team member performance again. Product review score. And customer satisfaction. And the reason why I put customer satisfaction further down is that, to me, it's one of those things where, if you look at really the demonstrable nature of it, the way in which these sort of CSAT, customer satisfaction surveys work, is that they really rely on the person paying a lot of attention, really. They also are usually dependent on the person's mood. So to me, customer satisfaction is sort of like lower down the line. Now, what I would refer to as, well, this line is really, to me, from sort of management point of view, from point of evidencing where you are, from point of view of sort of really communicating metrics that are useful, because this is almost like the line of usefulness. So the more quantitative something is, the more useful it is, at least to me, because what we're saying with these metrics are, the metric's accurate. When I say there are 5 of these things, there are 5 of these things, and we know what these things are. So 5 cups of coffee, they're all the same, there are 5 of them. That, to me, as a manager, is very useful, because when I'm communicating it to people, it's not open to interpretation. There's sort of like nominal amounts, versus the qualitative stuff, which are useful, but they're very much open to subjectivity and interpretation. And therefore, if you're ever playing those sort of metrics back to someone, or communicating using those metrics, qualitative metrics, they're almost in the territory of sort of more emotional persuasion type metrics, happiness of team, etc. And I just feel, especially from a sort of technology and engineering point of view, those metrics are probably the least useful with regards to dealing with any problems. They can also be a bit distracting. So, for instance, customer satisfaction, stakeholder satisfaction, if the customers are worried about something else, you won't really pick that up with regards to the metrics. Maybe they're worried about the economy or an election or their jobs, all those sort of things. And you'll see a score drop down. And the problem with that is trying to react to that. People will start worrying about it. People start complaining. They'll say, oh my God, that score's gone down. Whereas the actual contributing factors to that score are things that are actually out of your control. And because there's not a good level of accuracy or sort of evidence and demonstrable reasons, we're then in the territory where we're running off trying to solve a problem that we don't actually have. So that's the line of usefulness. Okay, so we've gone through the line of usefulness. So wanted to just go through some sort of common pitfalls, some tips to actually avoid common pitfalls. So with regards to quantitative metrics, I would recommend, first off, making sure that you have a clear unit of measure. So what I mean with that is, going back to the example with regards to cups of coffee, make sure it's clear what you mean by a cup of coffee. So then when you say 2 cups of coffee, people know exactly what the cups of coffee mean. Same thing with the products sold. If you are trying to provide figures like products sold this week, then if they're not comparable products, so example of cars versus tires versus spark plugs, make it so that you split them up. If you're going to use metrics in that way, say number of cars sold, number of tires sold, number of spark plugs sold. Otherwise, to use the old adage, it's like taking the average temperature in a hospital. It doesn't actually make any sense. So that's the first one, clear unit of measure. Second one is, don't rely on qualitative metrics for your quantitative metrics. A really good example of this is within Agile, you have story points. Now, the whole point of story points is that they're effectively a way inside a team you can compare complexity of sort of one feature or one user story with another user story. And the idea is you can go through sort of no blame environment. You say, well, I think this is complexity 3, I think this is complexity 9. It doesn't matter really too much. It's all about you understanding, okay, how many story points can we do within a sprint, deliver within a sprint, and also can we get our estimating skills accurate enough that we've one thing right size a sprint. Say we can do say 70 story points, and that means we can do this one, but also it means you can sort of compare your view of complexity of one feature over another. Problem with that is that story points are just arbitrarily given to features or user stories, pieces of work within a sprint. So if I were to then say the number of story points from this team has increased this month, therefore that's a good thing, it doesn't really mean much. The problem with it is that story points, because they can be changed, they're a fluctuating sort of currency, as it were. So that they're not quantitative, they're qualitative. So avoid using metrics, quantitative metrics, 5 story points, 10 story points, when the story points don't actually mean anything. In that instance, if you want to be more quantitative, use number of lines of code per day, or some measure which is absolute, because otherwise you are using qualitative metrics and you do run the risk of really it not meaning much. Not really, because obviously story points can change, and I mean, the worst thing would be to try and then compare those metrics with, say, other teams, because different people, probably different sort of work, and they're not a fixed sort of currency. So that's the second point. The third point is, it's a bit obvious, but not really. So make sure your quantitative metrics are accurate. Now, when I've run programs, I've always opted to have, for instance, finance, I've always opted to have someone that's a qualified accountant, management accountant actually, because it's their job, and also the reason why they have their certification, to sort of tell me if something's wrong. You know, they're experienced and they will look and they will check to see if there are issues there. Now, what that is sort of like the flip side of that is if you have people that are collating your metrics that are inexperienced and not really qualified to be doing that work, make sure they have a mentor, make sure you double check or they double check the work, because the challenge with that otherwise is, you know, not intentionally, but the accuracy of those metrics cannot really be confidently taken on face value. And as we'll see later on, one of the big things with this is you need to be able to stand by your metrics, accuracy, unit of measure, etc., so that your metrics actually are honest. So that's the third one. Make sure you can justify the sample. Now, this is a bit like that lies, damned lies, and statistics type, quote. Imagine we go back to the product sold, and we've changed it to number of cars sold, and I'm giving a report. I say, today we have sold 50 cars. Now, if someone says, Mike, why have you said today? Shouldn't that be for the month? If it turns out the reason why I chose today was because we haven't sold any cars for the whole month, that sounds awesome because I said it's today, I lose all my credibility. And it's sort of like, you can be challenged in terms of accuracy, because what you're doing is you're choosing your sample set to actually make the figures look good, which is really away from the quantitative side of things. It's more on the qualitative side again. So make sure you can justify your sample set. If you report on a monthly basis on your figures, whatever they are, keep reporting on a monthly basis, or if you're going to change it, come up with justification and get agreement from everyone using those metrics, reading them, viewing them, whatever. Get agreement from everyone that that's okay. Otherwise, it looks like you are taking a sample set and you're massaging it to make yourself look good. And there's the whole sort of classic joke about 9 out of 10 cats love this cat food. The person asked 100 cats. It was only the 10 that really sort of fitted that they chose. So I suppose it would be 9 fitted. So that's the thing. Make sure you can justify your sample set of data for your quantitative metrics. The last one, if you're reviewing metrics, and this is quite an important one if you have sort of reports or vendors or whatever it is, sort of third parties where they are sharing these quantitative metrics with you. Make sure you ask the right questions. Make sure that you pay attention to the metrics that they're showing you. One of the big challenges with regards to governance meetings, steer codes, etc., is that there's almost an implicit agreement with these things. So, it's a Friday afternoon, you turn up to a governance meeting with a vendor, they take you through a whole load of metrics, it's really difficult to understand, you're getting quite tired, and they give you a huge table on a PowerPoint. Loads of figures, you don't know what they mean. If you don't ask for the data to be reformatted or explained or taken offline and explained, you're sort of implicitly approving that. And it's unfortunately just a fact of life. If you don't speak up when you're in that sort of situation, there is an implicit approval. And obviously if you go away and have a think about it, you could always say, well, actually, sorry, I need to follow this up. But even then, it's going to be a bit more difficult to actually sort of think back to, okay, specifically, there was this slide, I didn't understand these figures on the table. It would make much more sense if it was in a graph. And from sort of the other side, and along the same lines as this sort of sample set, sometimes with these sort of quantitative metrics, and remember, sort of line of usefulness, if they're not accurate, but no one checks to see if they're accurate, people will take them on face value that they're quantitative metrics. The accuracy is high and they're demonstrable. If they're presented in such a way that it's difficult to view and difficult to then ask questions, that's sort of similar sort of trick to the sample as well. which is essentially a whole load of metrics there. You're hoping no one will actually ask the questions, but hey, if there's any problem in the future and it turns out they're a bit more positive, then you can say, well, look, this went through governance. There weren't any problems raised. It's not my fault. So I think from point of view of reviewing these metrics, if you've got any doubt with regards to what the metrics mean, any doubt with regards to whether they're accurate or not, ask for further explanation. And obviously it isn't one of these things where if you're doing this each week, you have to do that every week. What I'd recommend doing is, if you need to do that once, ask for clarification of the specific metrics you're seeing, and then also ask for the process and the quality assurance process the people that produce those metrics go through, so that you can be rest assured when you see those metrics, they do have the accuracy and they're talking about units of measure that are consistent with a sample that also makes sense. So that's the end of this first video. Hopefully it's useful, and please like and subscribe if you want to see more videos. Thanks very much. Take care. Bye.